Okay, everyone, and welcome to the weekend edition of the Market Report with myself, Michael Noss from Stats Edge Trading. For those who are new here, welcome. We basically, every weekend, at the end of the week, take a step back, look at the weekly charts, try to figure out what happened throughout this week. We do this again at the end of every month, but the weekly one I really like because as someone who is day trading, swing trading, always looking for opportunities in the market, it is very good to have everything kind of zoomed out and said, okay, now what's actually happening? What is it that I have to look at? And get a big view of the market. So if you want to make sure you get this stuff emailed directly to you, go to statsedgetrading.com, sign up for the email list. I don't sell it. I don't spam emails or anything like that. Just a good way to make sure that we are getting in touch with these things. So we're going to start in the crypto space. We're going to start actually here with Bitcoin, like we always do. And just, it's really nothing to say, but it's a monster run. Talked about buying Bitcoin on this breakout and adding right here. So far, it's been amazing. I also talked on the channel, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, you're seeing it, about this Ethereum trade where I'm doing the same thing, buying these things. And I like them when they're breaking out of this anchored VWAP from all-time highs. So I'm actually taking this down and more through things that I'm looking at in different cryptos, right? So one that I'm watching, for example, or two that I'm watching is Link. And this one's actually, if we just draw the anchored VWAP from right up here, this chain link is actually broken right through this here. Oh no, this one. It's sitting right on. It's going to be different depending on the broker. But yeah, it's fighting with that right now. So if we get a break out of this base, I like to look at this chain link. The other one that I was looking at is Ripple. So XRP, USD, this is another XR. This is another one that's a massive name when it comes to kind of long-term Bitcoin. Like, it's been in the crypto space for a long time. It's doing the same thing where it's battling this anchored VWAP from all-time highs. So these are two that I'm watching going forward. It's the way I'm dealing with them, and it's the way that I'm sticking out of the ones like Dogecoin and names like this that are nowhere near this anchored VWAP level, right? If I draw this out, it's way up here. It's got to triple before it gets there. It's just a good way for me to know what the average price of the coin is at that high and to make sure I'm buying the stuff that's breaking that average height or average price. Good way for me to filter the environment of everything to go, okay, what is it that I'm actually going to take a look at and what is it that I'm actually going to trade? Now, going into the traditional currency space, if we go over to take a look at where are my FX? That's okay. We don't need it. Oh, it's right here, Forex stuff. Obviously, going to start with the Dixie, the dollar index. It's very important. Had pretty, like 4 weeks down in a row. We were getting pretty close to this level right here. Then we had this little bottoming tail doji candle. And I was looking at this when we were talking about this last week and saying, hey, it's a pretty bottom looking candle right here. We had a little bounce, but a weak bounce, right? We're back to this resistance right here. If we came into this low right here, I think it'd be an interesting area to short. But a bounce that was expected to happen. Now, what's interesting is that as the dollar was bouncing, so was the stock market. We'll go through that in a second, but actually broke out into new highs. So it's very interesting that this correlation between dollar up, stocks down, stocks up, dollar down seemed to have broken. Now, I always like to go to the Euro USD next because it's a big part of this dollar index. So I had this note up here as support question mark. It looks like it was. And now it's pulling back to the anchored VWAP from this high right here, and maybe the anchored VWAP from this low print right here. So it might be a good time to start sniffing around the euro one way or another here. Now, a couple other, I just keep looking over because this is where my notes are. A couple other things I want to take a look at in the currency space is this Aussie CAD. I like the look of this one because it's two currencies that are both petrodollars, so it takes that out of the equation. This one's actually broken out of this anchored VWAP, and now it's pulling back to it and put in a nice bottoming tail this week. So it could be some nice moves for this Aussie CAD type of area. Now, we had an Aussie yen breakdown. This was actually looking a little bit like a cup and handle. We had a breakdown this week, but a bounce into the end of the week. I am still worried about betting against the Bank of Japan. I don't think betting against central banks is, the best thing to do for your money. So I am going to keep an eye on this. I'm going to keep an eye on this here going forward. So if we get a bounce in through here on this weekly chart, and then I find a time frame in which to move lower, I'm going to be interested in moving lower and in shorting this thing if we are failing at this prior high. So only other currency to look at is the pound. I talked about this in the midweek video, and I talked about this last week. We're seeing some relative strength in the pound. So we saw two kind of big solid down weeks in the euro, but the pound, we're actually holding on a little bit. That's interesting to me because if we get this trade in the pound that looks like it's going to kind of resolve higher, or the dollar is going to move lower, it may be better to look at the pound than the euro because it's showing some relative strength on this pullback. Now let's get into traditional stocks, and we're going to use trade ideas for this. As always, link in the description below. And I'm just going to shift myself over here as well, because we're going to start taking a look at the S&P 500 with finally a breakout this week. It's kind of better to look on the daily chart, just barely, but this line that I drew was this line overhead right here, and then also this area right here. Looks like we are breaking and holding over there on the S&P 500. That is fantastic because we have been stuck in this range. I counted out the candles for like 11 candles. That's over 2 weeks we've been hammered in this range. So finally breaking out. Want to see some follow through on Monday. If we get that follow through on Monday, then we might be off to the races for another leg higher and some Santa Claus type rally. Important to note that the RSP is a little bit underperforming, but we're looking at weekly charts here, and the RSP is up big off its open. So for those who don't know, the RSP is an equal weighted version of the S&P 500. So where the S&P 500 is weighted based off how big the company is, so Apple, Microsoft, Google is going to have more of an impact on the S&P 500 than, little lesser known S&P 500 names. The RSP is an equal weight across it. So for anyone who's ever looking and saying, hey, is this just a big market cap tech rally, or is it an everything in the S&P 500 name? RSP is your answer. We're getting a rally on that too, showing that the everything is kind of participating in this rally, not just a few names, as maybe some doomers out there would like you to believe. QQQ, a little bit of underperformance on the QQQ. Didn't break quite over that high this week. And same thing on the semiconductor. But both of these look pretty poised. The semiconductor, I really like the look of this area right here, where we had resistance and then resistance, and now maybe that's acting as support, who knows, but a very nice look here on the semiconductor sector and the semiconductor index. MDY, which is our mid caps, again, just more evidence that things are actually moving with a lot of stuff. It's a lot of names, not just the big cap names. Nice inside week, not a whole lot of action, but on the daily chart, in the MDY, still holding up very, very strong on those mid-cap names. Same with the small cap, same story. A little bit more action on the small cap, so a great push in that as well. So everything under the hood, as far as I can tell, is looking fantastic. Now, so ETF here, we have ARKK. So we have ARK Innovations. This one's worrying me a little bit because now we are up 6 weeks, maybe, minus this one little week, into a resistance zone. And that's not an area that I want to be buying these names, not necessarily an area I want to be selling them, but not really an area I want to be buying them. IBB, it has the same kind of thing where it's up now a little bit, but it's getting into this prior resistance zone right here. That may be a problem if we reverse and push lower. URA is still looking great. Had a down week this week, but look at the 3 bottoming tails now. So every time it gets pushed down so far and continuing, seems to be like there is some underlying bid in uranium we have to pay attention to. As someone who owns a lot of uranium, I'm obviously very happy that that's the case. And then we have USO. So this has been kind of the dog, the oil and natural gas, been a little bit of the dog of the industry recently, and continues that way. We are reaching, and I hate this term, but oversold territory with a little bit of a bottoming tail here on the weekly chart. Main reason I'm focused on that is that's getting us into this area of support. So we had this big push up. we had this pullback, which is a little bit of a deeper pullback than I would like. But we are having this pullback. So if we reverse from here, I'm going to watch this on a lower time frame, some specific oil names. Now, get in a couple names that I'm watching here going into next week for individual names, people that are interested in that. We have Upstart, so UPST. This prior resistance right here, it finally breaking out of. We put in this bottoming tail the other day and sold off, but we rallied and we kind of held that. Thing that's pointing out to this, to me, is a 45% short float. So nearly half of the entire float on Upstart is short after this big push higher. That's pretty wild. It's pretty wild to me there. Speaking of large short floats, this is one I had on the list. Full disclosure, I own some of this name, but we have this ACHR with a massive push up here on ACHR, a blow through this area right here. Another big short float name. It's kind of a theme that you'll see. 30% short float on ACHR. CLS, not CLD, CLS. Celestica is nice push up, and then it's been in this bull flag for a long period of time. Down here, again, these are the picture-in-picture charts we have over at Trade Ideas. You can see the weekly chart. This thing's just been absolute rocket ship. And then, again, consolidating in this area, looking for a breakout here as well. Last but not least, RBLX, Roblox, holding this post-earnings gap. So we gapped up on earnings, and then we're kind of just messing around with this zone right here. Pull back, we've tested into the gap, and then it rallied. So that gap fill failed. Now that we're hanging out with this high right here, I like the look of RBLX if we can break this and move higher. So that is it for this week. Thank you all for coming by. Thanks for the likes, the follows, going to statsedtrading.com, and signing up for the email list. I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you guys next week. Just get away from the screens for a little while.